Hi, my name is Mark Walker, and I'm the editorial director of the FinTech Times, and we're here at 24Fintech. I'm going to start off by asking my guest to introduce himself to you, the audience.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, my name is Hasan Kazmi. I lead digital partnerships for Visa in SAMEA, which is Central Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And digital partnerships means my team is responsible for all of our partnerships with fintech clients and also some of our large technology partners.
Fantastic. So we've worked together on the fourth iteration of the Middle East and Africa report. So what I really wanted to do is sort of dive into a little bit more of the detail that we found within that, and obviously what Visa's doing within those sort of areas as well. One of the main sort of areas we started with is that a lot of people think that fintech is just payments. And people might also think that Visa is just payments. But actually, there's actually quite a large amount of other subsectors that go in to make up what we call fintech. What, from your point of view and Visa's point of view, how do you see the separate subsectors playing out?
Yes. So I think one of the main reasons people a lot of times think fintech is only payments and vice versa is because payments is the critical enabler to then open up the rest of the financial services ecosystem of fintechs. So you're very correct. So when you think of fintech, it's not just payments, but payments often is what needs to be digitized first before you can open up the fintech ecosystem. And as we think about fintech ecosystem, it's a very broad space. So you have everything from digital banking to micro lending to alternative ways to score credit to small businesses, wealth tech, insure tech. The space is quite wide. I think in our region specifically, since we are sort of earlier in the evolution of fintech, there's been a lot of innovation that's happened in payments, which, as I mentioned before, then opens up the broader ecosystem of fintech.
Okay, fantastic. That actually is very nicely sums up with lots of others. So actually about it, lending, wealth tech, all of these things don't really work correctly until the infrastructure of payments have been sorted.
Yes.
Now, obviously, the Middle East and Africa is a very diverse area. Give me an idea of how you've seen those regions develop their fintech offering.
So the key thing is it's developing very, very fast. But also at the same time, there's also a lot of diversity within the continent, as one would expect, given the size of the continent and the number of countries you there. So the intellectually challenging part of working in the region is how do you balance the local needs of the consumers, the regulatory requirements, but also at the same time, from a fintech point of view, fintech is basically a business that's built on scale. So if I was a fintech, I need to balance multiple different aspects of working in the continent, scaling the business, and also developing something for the consumers that's localized for them. So if you take a step back, how does Visa play a part in here? I think first of all is having an on-the-ground presence. So now we actually have people on the ground in DRC, we have people on the ground in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, amongst a bunch of other places also within the continent. The second is getting a much better sense of what's actually happening in the fintech ecosystem in the market. So we have two programs that we run in the continent. One is specific to Africa. It's called the Visa Accelerator Program. So that's where Visa works with a number of different fintechs across the continent. They go through a pretty rigorous screening process, and we put multiple cohorts of fintechs through that program. And the program is designed to identify the fintechs that have unique product and solutions that are driving impact. So it's not just a financial ROI, it's about are they bringing people into the digital ecosystem, for example. And what we provide to them is one-on-one mentoring, coaching, helping them with things like go-to-market strategy, business plans, marketing. And I think most importantly for the fintechs is access to networking opportunities with other larger companies, with banks, with potential VC founders. Having a program like that, I think, has a fundamentally positive impact on the fintechs and as a result in those local economies. And similarly, we also have another program called the Visa Everywhere Initiative, which also works with select startups. And as part of that process, they get a little bit of coaching, but they also get funding towards the end of it. So as Visa thinks about its footprint and its strategy within Africa for fintech specifically, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Given, again, the diversity of the continent, the diversity of the population, the different needs, and also, frankly, the slightly different maturity level of the fintech ecosystem, we need to be in the continent and have a few different initiatives in place that can address the different needs.
Yeah. And I guess, we see a lot of different sort of styles, such as, if you look at, say, Europe, you very much focus on NFTs, paying with phone. In the US, maybe not even so much that. It's still like the actual card sort of side of things. And then a lot of people would think Africa is much more about digital wallets and that type of thing. But given your programs, how do you see those sort of technologies in payments panning out?
Yes. The interesting part about Africa is because the needs of the consumers is so varied, there are multiple solutions that are in demand. So if you look at lending, the lending for a typical consumer in Africa is challenging for various reasons. So there's an opportunity for fintechs to go in and analyze the customer's risk or a small business risk in a very different way where some of the other larger players may not feel comfortable doing. So they still operate within a regulatory framework, but because they have more data points on a consumer or a business, they can actually provide lending. So as you think about how they operate differently, lending is one of the areas. Similarly, I touched upon credit scoring. Credit scoring is actually critical for small business to get access to capital, which then helps them grow and has a very positive impact on the community, because in most places in Africa, small businesses are the primary generator for employment and jobs. So as a fintech, if you can provide access to capital to different businesses, they can grow, which means they can bring on more people, which obviously has a very positive impact into the communities. So as we think about the fintech ecosystem, it's not only providing access to cheaper and faster payments, remittance, things like that, it's having a fundamentally positive impact in the communities that they operate in.
Fantastic. And I guess from your sort of experience with all the different initiatives, do you focus on problem statements that you then go out and ask fintechs to relate to, or do you look at a load of different fintechs and say, oh, these are the ones we want to look after? What's the sort of process that you go through?
So it's a combination of both. Given the breadth of problems that fintechs or really any new company could solve for, we take a holistic approach. So in some cases, you have fintechs that have thought through the problem statement, have tested products into the markets, and then they come to us. So in that case, we are looking at the solution that the fintech has developed. In other cases, since we have a pretty good presence on the ground, as we spend time in the markets, as we speak to our B2B partners, but also directly to consumers, we identify unmet needs. And then Visa obviously has the ability to develop its own products and services to meet those needs. Sometimes it may make sense for us to partner with the fintech companies and say, listen, you guys are better positioned to quickly develop something and take it to the market. So what that means is there's no one-size-fits-all approach. We'll do both. In some cases, we'll partner with a fintech that has a ready-made solution that we think is addressing a need. In other cases, we will identify a problem statement and take it either internally to our product development or innovation team, or work with a fintech that has something that's trying to address it, and we may partner with them to say, this is how you can actually narrow down your focus and address this specific problem statement, and then we work with them to get that off them.
And then, obviously, as you were just saying, Africa, we're talking about it as quite a general continent side of things, but it is quite diverse in its nature. So, for example, the difference between, say, two of our cities that we've added, Ethiopia and Nigeria, is what's the sort of the general similarities and differences, do you think, between those two specific goals?
That's a good question. So even though there is a lot of diversity, like you mentioned, there's also a lot of similarities, because if you think of the end consumer, and the end consumer could be individual like you and I, it could be a business, fundamentally what they're looking for is growth. And they're looking for a seamless experience. So there are themes that are consistent. So if you think about growth, if you think of an individual customer, people want to have jobs that allows them to earn, to pay the bills, but to save, to grow, to invest. If you think about, and so that fundamental need of consumers is the same regardless of if they're in DRC, if they're in Ethiopia, if they're in Algeria, or even if they're in the US, right? The only difference would be how do you get there? So the similarity is around what the end user wants. I think the difference is how do you help them get there? And it's the same case if you look at small businesses. If you speak to any small business owner anywhere in the world, what they'll say is my number one goal is to grow and expand my business. So now that theme is consistent regardless of what small business owner you speak to. The challenge that we have as Visa as a company and then a fintech partners is then how do you develop a customizable solution that addresses the needs of a small business owner who wants to grow in DRC and a small business owner who wants to go in Morocco and Algeria. So the need again is the same. The product and solution you develop will be different, and then the go-to-market strategy will be different.
Fantastic. So this is now probably the last and the most difficult question. So when we write the report next year together, will there be any new countries we will add? Or what will be the themes of next year's report, do you think?
I think the theme will be very much focused on growth. Because if you look at the fintech ecosystem, it's starting to mature, but it's maturing much faster. Because the continent and the region, so Africa, Middle East, is expanding. If you look at where we are today, we're in Saudi Arabia at the fintech festival, the Fintech 24 festival, and the amount of energy you see here is completely different than what you see in other parts of the world. So what that means is it's going to evolve and evolve very quickly. So next year's team is very much going to be focused on, we have a solid foundation. We have more or less the infrastructure in place. How do we grow and scale this much faster, much quicker than anything else we've seen in any other part of the world?
Fantastic. I look forward to reading it next year. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Check the link in the description below to find out more about Visa's Africa Accelerator, a groundbreaking initiative that connects Africa's brightest minds with experienced mentors, cutting-edge technology, and unparalleled investment opportunities to fast-track startup success across Africa's dynamic fintech ecosystem.